Hello, everyone. I'm sure you've had a very long and interesting day, so happy that you stuck around. As was introduced, my name is Agada Nameri. I run 21M Capital, which is a platform and a blockchain focused fund. And I'm happy to sit on the panel and talk about what seems to be the buzzword of 2019, which is DeFi. So before we dive into the discussion, I'd like to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us what they're working on and what they're currently interested in. So please, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Alex, and I'm from Zerion. I'm one of the founders, and I'm also the CTO of the project. And what we're trying to do as a project is like to bring DeFi to the masses. Because right now, DeFi is like something very geeky, which is like really hard to access. And at the same time, it's very fascinating. So like we're trying to build a banking interface on top of all these like DeFi protocols built on top of Ethereum, kind of to make it accessible by less sophisticated users, to make it simple and to provide them different financial services such as credit and like investing in different sort of assets, etc., through like nice UX and like nice interface.
So I'm Mark, CEO of Fuse. Our company is taking what needs to be invested in launching a consumer service that deals with money and takes it down to zero, launching a non-custodial service that can be used to payments, can be used to fintech without investing money in KYC, in custody, basically reducing the cost of development, reducing the cost of ongoing maintenance, create better governance tools, and eventually create a much better, basically create a Venmo alternative which is decentralized.
Hi, my name is Lasse Clausen. I'm one of the founding partners of 1KX. We're a Berlin-based token network fund. So we're token maximalists. We don't invest in anything that has a traditional business model. We really believe in tokenized networks.
Thank you. So maybe
And by the way, Bitcoin is a token too, so that includes that.
So maybe we can actually start with you. It seems that we can look at DeFi as kind of Legos, right? We have different Legos, and we can put them together and create something that we didn't have before. And I'm wondering if DeFi is meant to disrupt the traditional financial system. What kind of applications or token models or token economics or formations of this do you see as the lowest hanging fruits, and what can we expect in kind of 5 years?
I think the great thing about permissionless platforms is that you don't have to mimic something that exists and might suck and make it a little better. You can just sort of create whatever you want and experiment around a lot. And then at some point the legacy system will just be, it's kind of, I used to have a Windows computer for a long time, and then I got a Mac too, and I just stopped using the Windows. Like, it's just naturally happened. And I think something like this might happen as well. I think also if someone grows up now and experiences sort of DeFi, let's say, on Ethereum, and then why would they ever want to go to a bank that gives you like 3 pages of fine print? I mean, it's literally, it's written so small that you don't read it. And this is so fucking obvious, like, why would, so I think anyone who grows up where this is actually choice and not the status quo, they're just like, why would they put up with that, right? And so this is a very, it's an abstract answer.
Isn't that just improving like current system? Like, what is the,
no,
I'm wondering, since you invest in early stage projects and kind of have a long-term vision of what this is meant to be in the future, or what it's meant to enable, I'm wondering what do you think is the disruption? Like, what doesn't exist today that would exist?
It's new business models. I think that's the disruption. It's not trying to say we will build it a bit better. We'll build it in a way that couldn't be compared. It's like Lightning. It's not an example of DeFi, but some people consider it part of DeFi. It doesn't offer faster transaction times than Visa. It offers something radically different, completely like endless, like theoretical endless capacity of throughput. So we're talking about things that really hard to compare. Like if somebody will do payments differently with a totally different business model without Visa in the middle, does it compete with Visa? Does decentralized storage competes with Amazon, or is it a totally new business model, totally new use case of people that are just found the need which technology didn't allow before?
And
So
yeah, and I think, I mean, you're probably going to hate this answer, but we set ourselves up specifically where I don't have to know this exact application will be what wins, because I don't know, nobody knows, VCs don't know either. On average, they all lose money. Nobody knows how to predict innovation or something that will get adoption. In this space, it's nice actually to be a protocol investor, and theoretically, and then so far it's proven true, you participate on the value accrual of whatever happens on top of Ethereum, let's say, or something.
on-chain verifiable claims.
Yes, we actually sort of participate as an investor in sort of just a layer one. I think so that's why we look more for, is it really permissionless? I think that's extremely important for us. Innovation is a numbers game. So on the App Store, 1 in 10,000 apps is successful. And so it's just a matter of probability that the more stuff happens on top of a platform, the more likely like in 90s, nobody knew that the WeChat sticker UI was the killer use case, like one of them of the internet, right? And so just the more experiments you have, the more likely something that we can't even think of yet will be invented. And if it's a permissionless system, you just get to that scale faster because you don't have editors. Like having editors doesn't scale, right? And you can see that with the app stores now, it's really pretty dead because every app needs to go past some stupid editor, and they have a particular model of what they think is innovation and what is allowed or not. And you just won't have that explosion of innovation now.
Okay, so touching upon permissioned and permissionless and centralized and decentralized issues, I want to ask you, Alexey, you're focused on UX, and I'm wondering, it seems that dApps have generally not as good as a UX as centralized applications so far. And I'm wondering why you think that is. Is it because most of the talent in the current ecosystem came from kind of Bitcoin maximalists that were focused on the core tech and with less experience in UX, or what is it exactly?
I think that's kind of both, but I think there's always going to be a compromise between custodial and non-custodial, because it's impossible to make everyone use like completely non-custodial solutions just because it's way too complicated for normal people and just like adds too much friction. Like even just think of it, like to use any dApp right now, like built on top of Ethereum, you need to have some browser extension as MetaMask. That's already too complicated. And you need to also manage private keys, like ideally you need to understand what it is, like how not to lose them, etc. And it's like way too complicated for normal people. And like most of the apps so far, I believe they were built like in that idea in mind, that like people want to manage their assets, they want like full control over that. So they kind of intentionally made things more complicated for end users by introducing that additional friction of private key management and etc. But right now, I think there's a big trend of semi-custodial solutions in a way. Well, like first, like long term, I believe like that smart contract-based wallets are the future. So like instead of like storing your funds on your private key, you better store it like on a smart contract-based solution where like there are multiple keys that you manage, and most likely you don't even know about those keys. So like the application manages it for you, but you just know that you have multiple devices. Let's say you have an app installed like from App Store on your phone, and you have some web browser and whatever, and somehow it works under the hood. Like, and users shouldn't understand how it works, but at the same time, it's like the most secure approach for now. But for now, I think there is a big trend like of this year is like solutions like Fortmatic and Portis, etc. People who basically take custody of your funds, and like normal users can just delegate private key management for them. And from users' perspective, it looks like you just need to enter some phone number or like some email, and after that, so it looks similar to like traditional sign-up or registration.
Do you think the issue is only with custody, with like the private keys?
I mean,
or
with
is it a
UX?
broader UX?
I mean, for sure,
challenge?
yeah, the challenge is much bigger than that. But I think like right now, like the whole DeFi and like all the apps is like a big playground, like big sandbox in a way. So like there's lots of experiments, but not that many production-ready products. And like this is like our main goal is Zerion, is like to build a production-ready like product with nice UX. And there are like few others. Let's say like there's Argent, they're trying to build a nice mobile app. So it's getting there. I think it's just like little bit too early, and like the way how it started was just like developers experimenting with different things here and there. So like initially the UX wasn't great, but it's getting better now for sure. And I'm pretty sure like that like even our UX is already much better than like some banks that were built like 20 years back, whatever. Like their UI is horrible. Like I'm scared like every time when I'm trying to open my bank website.
But to
Mark,
that
do you
point,
wanna add?
yeah, that
We're also focusing on UX, but from a different angle.
yeah, I think that open source is a long-term investment, sometimes decades. So Linux was much more useful for developers, or much easier to use to developers until it reached the point where we all use Linux in some way, which is very transparent to us. And Visa also, Visa at the start didn't work like it works today. It wasn't. It was a lot of trial and error to reach the right model, to reach the right way to. So basically, they gave the merchants carry all the cost. That worked for Visa, but again, it takes decades to find sustainable business models. It takes decades to optimize stuff, and most importantly, it takes decades to turn something into a protocol like HTTP, TCP/IP. It all took decades. So it's a long-term investment. So we're reached there soon.
Thank you. So yeah, I'll continue with you, and you're working to allow businesses to create communities and integrate their own token into the network, and we're kind of at the time now, or in recent months, that altcoins or tokens in general were maybe less popular, let's say, and kind of Bitcoin rose back to its like reign. And I'm wondering if you consider this, a temporary thing or repercussions of what happened in 2017, 2018, and if you honestly think that in the future we're going to have thousands of different tokens with each their own token economics and raison d'être.
So
basically.
first of all, I think that today the Bitcoin dominance is 70%. Year and a half ago it was 30%. And we would have a completely different discussion. You wouldn't see even Bitcoin panels. If we were making this conference a year and a half ago, Bitcoin would not be mentioned at all. And now it's completely the opposite. So Bitcoin and the other alts have a symbiotic relationship, but it's not a zero-sum game, in my opinion. The success scenario of Bitcoin is that the entire value of censorship-resistant or the entire value of basically money laundering will be captured in a token. That's like the value proposition of Bitcoin. That in the day that somebody will start printing money, there will be a bigger demand for Bitcoin. That's the speculation. Ethereum is not in the game at all. It's not a zero-sum game at all. So they're symbiotic. They influence each other. But at the end game for Ethereum is to onboard a lot of people that don't know they're using Ethereum on the back end, because Ethereum philosophically is very different than Bitcoin. It's for computation. If somebody needs to do computation directly, it's not the consumers. It's really the organizations, it's the custodians, it's the infrastructure behind the scenes, and it's like Visa needs to be completely transparent. So it's not Bitcoin in its goals. That would be my take. So after the crypto, after Bitcoin will rise, we will see dominance rising. Then we'll have the alt season. It happened like 4 times.
Cycles.
Yeah.
Okay. So touching upon Ethereum for a minute, and I know Lasse, this is something that you're interested in. We see most applications in general, but specifically, obviously in DeFi, are built on top of Ethereum. Is it necessarily because the platform is better, the infrastructure is better, or are there other factors that are contributing to that?
So I think there's a few, and it's reinforcing. So the first was probably that philosophically, or the community of Ethereum was something that attracted very, very smart and very innovative engineers and of high quality, right? Engineering is one of the few disciplines where like the 1% is basically engineers 20 times better than even the 99th right afterwards. And so those are the ones that you want to attract. That's why EOS doesn't work. You can't just throw money at like enterprise devs and anyway. So I think Ethereum was very successful in intriguing these type of engineers to experiment around on it, and then a few things kind of worked. It also attracted developers to support the ecosystem and build developer tooling. and then and I think Alex can talk more about why they actually decided to build on Ethereum, and then and I'll give the word to him in a second. And then another thing that happened is right now it's like money legals, right? So these are interoperable, and you can basically plug into a not mature but already an existing small financial ecosystem and build really, really powerful things, right? And so, for example, you have now these money markets like Compound, Nuo, and DYDX, etc. And so now you can actually, on top of that, build already like a protocol that automatically reallocates capital, whatever one of those money markets actually, is the most profitable. And so you basically have like a meta money market on top of that, right? This is so fascinating to work on. And so I think this is like another advantage. And then Alex, if you have thoughts on.
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit more on top of that. So it's just like, first of all, it's just like huge network effect, because like it's impossible to build like, so the whole DeFi thing on top of Ethereum is kind of different bricks that somehow interconnected. So like some protocols could not exist without other ones. So let's say it's all started with Maker, who like created a stable coin pegged to the US dollar, and like Compound could not exist without Maker, just because like their main value proposition that they can give out cheaper loans compared to Maker, but they still use the same stable coin. And there are like other money markets outside of Compound that also somehow reuse like Compound's liquidity, etc. And after that, you can just build some like other layers of smart contract that reuse the same liquidity. And on top of that, you can build some interface. You can like do some banking business similar to what we do, like also like reusing what other people built. And like if you look at any other chain, so like in order to make it work, you'll need to replicate all the same bricks, and it's like pretty much impossible just to like take one group of developers to build all of that together. So you need separate developers working on different parts of that, and it's also a matter of time because it can't just appear like at the same time. So like first Maker needed to appear, then some other protocols on top of that, which gave way to new protocols on top of that, etc. So it evolves, and it's like really hard to have something similar on a different chain right now, although not impossible. So you never know what the landscape is going to look like in a few years.
So you both you mentioned Maker and Compound, and it seems that currently the main use case for DeFi, or the main application, is borrowing or lending, and it's quite clear what the lenders have to gain from this. They want to lend their crypto and earn interest, and they want to do it through a system that is, permissionless and coded into the smart contract, and that's all fine and interesting. But I'm wondering, who's borrowing this crypto, and for what purpose?
I guess I can take this one as well. Other people can just add on top of that later. So I guess the main reason originally was just because the market fell so far, and like some people just didn't want to sell their crypto. So there were like lots of crypto holders who were still bullish, let's say on Ether, but like Ether dropped down to $100, and no one wanted to sell for like $100. So instead, but they still needed money. Like especially there was like company use cases who had lots of Ether and who didn't want to sell at the bottom. So instead of selling Ether directly, they will just like use it as collateral, and they will take out loans in stable coins to cover their current needs, and they were willing to pay high interest rates for that as long as they believe that Ether is going to be higher. So like even let's say like you need to pay like 20% or what's like 16.5% stability fee for Maker right now, and it still makes sense for people who believe that Ether is going to grow more than 16% within the next year. And I'm pretty sure there are lots of people who believe that. And as long as that's the case, they just like keep borrowing stable coins without selling their crypto, just being bullish on Ether, and that's like a huge use case. That's kind of the thing that drives the whole market and creates opportunity for lenders as well to also like earn interest on top of their deposits.
Thank you.
I think that's it. Then I think you have some platforms where you sort of immediately leverage long but
Leverage
I think
trade.
Right, yeah,
but
like
I think they're
DYDX,
actually
let's say.
smaller. I'm very curious. I would actually love to know exactly what people are doing with that borrowed money. My take would also be a large part of it was actually people that hold crypto. No, that people that hold crypto and they understand the volatility. They've experienced it before. They have cash needs, and it makes no sense to sell Ethereum at $100. So they have the confidence that it'll go up in the future. and then a certain part of it is just people who just want to leverage and go long, short, whatever.
But I think that any money is a form of credit. So the fact that you can create those schemes and do experimentation on with real money, like eventually it's a lot. It's not a sandbox. There's no regulator involved. Like it's testing stuff that are really on the gray side of legal stuff. So it's where probably the innovation will come from. You have a lot of money in those contracts. You're starting to test those ideas in the real world. You're seeing what's sustainable. You're seeing what's hacked, what's not, what's the flavor of centralization that we prefer. And probably it wouldn't be like one formula. It would be like you could think about a million ideas. So credit cards, again, it's one formula.
And I think we can't avoid, or I can't avoid asking, talking about DeFi and decentralization and levels of decentralization and different players. You know, you go from one end of the spectrum, which is DYDX or MakerDAO, to the other end of the spectrum of trying to disrupt the financial industry, which is Libra. How do they live together, if at all, and do you think they both would still exist in the future?
Libra and what?
Libra versus decentralized.
I think just if you have a for-profit company, you just will end up with a shittier product. It's just how it is. You will. If you have a for-profit company, you will end up with shittier products. It's just how it is, because at some point
shittier.
You
Why is that?
Because you will have, your incentive is to squeeze out as much money as possible at some point. If you're pretty smart, more long-term, you have Silicon Valley funding, whatever, you can delay that until you might have network effects and lock-in or technology dependence, etc. But then your products, you know, guess what? At the beginning, your product's free. I like it. Then you're going to start charging me. I don't like it as much. It's very simple. And so I think in the long run, let's assume this is part of our thesis, that these token networks have sustainable token models where you know, it allows you to experiment with token models where the incentives can be better aligned. So I'm not just a customer, now I'm a stakeholder. Instead of getting charged every time, they need funding as well, but maybe they had an initial treasury, whatever, sort of indirect monetization through a token. It just allows you and I've been there before as an entrepreneur building software where I had the Silicon Valley type backing of VCs. Our product was kind of shit because at the end of the day, we always thought in the long term, how do we get more data? How do we create a little bit more lock-in? Because I just know once I raise my B round from Kleiner Perkins, this is what I'm going to have to do. So this is like my very abstract kind of VC, like investor type answer that I think in the long run, these networks, protocol networks or token networks, assuming that it's a token model that the market sees value in it and supports it through investment and trading, I think they're just going to create vastly better products than any of these centralized ones. And I'm just, Compound doesn't have 3 pages of...
Is the result of that disappearance of the centralized forms?
I think it might be like what I mentioned at the beginning, like just people growing up now and they know this is actually an option, and then they look at these 5 pages of fine print, they're just going to be like completely puzzled. It's similar with like a child who grew up on Netflix. First time she watched TV and these ads come on and that she thought, oh, there's a new movie starting now. And so every 30 seconds she was like, what's going on? Why is there a new movie starting? She just didn't even understand, why would you disrupt my movie experience with like something else? And I think it could be that someone who grew up where, you know, a bank wasn't the status quo of the world, you know, 3-page, 5-page fine print that just tries to trick you, is not necessarily only the way, then they're just going to be like, they won't even understand why should they use this. It's so obvious.
People usually look at the financial system, and when there's when there's a boom and everything goes up, the financial system is sound, the technology is perfect. When it goes down, the technology is bad. In crypto, it's the same. When Bitcoin goes up, we need scaling. Bitcoin goes down, we don't need scaling. I think the infrastructure and the way that things are done are changing, because stocks, just an example, is a very recent, is a relatively recent innovation. It's also something that we learned how to price very recently. It's 300 years old, the first stocks, and it was, we only found a way to price it after there was a crash. Then we realized, okay, the models were wrong. We need to change them a bit. But still, the legal framework for equity for stocks is 80 years old. It's happened in the last big recession in the 20s. So all the rules are written in blood. If you add recession to the fact that people's perception of our institution will change with the recession, because suddenly it's not perfect when it's not working right. When the prices go down, usually it's not working right. So I think it's a perfect storm to rethink the models, to try to upgrade them. Right now it's like an orchard. You ask about somebody who's selling oranges to decide if it's a security or not, the Howey test. There's a lot of room to improve that. We don't know how, but this is the point. We don't need to ask how from the government. We just need to see what works at scale, what works in the long term.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit on top of what he just said, like, and coming back to your original question, like, what the difference between like centralized Libra and let's say like DYDX, etc. And I think like the biggest problem with like Libra is like and other centralized, like any blockchain that are managed by some like famous like centralized entities that are like they are not like censorship resistant at all. So it's like really easy to control them, etc. So like once Facebook announced that they're gonna launch Libra, they already had like lots of problems with Congress in the US. So like when you have like that one company that takes all the responsibility for the project, it's pretty easy to restrict. And I think that it's like the biggest benefit of the DeFi right now, because everyone is trying to be like non-custodial, trying to build those smart contracts who are ideally not managed by anyone or managed by some like DAOs or like decentralized governance itself. And it's like pretty much impossible to stop them, because even if DYDX built their contracts, they still do not have any control of them. So it's like even like they try to control them, they can't really do that, and like gives lots of opportunities for people. First, it allows companies like DYDX to operate globally from the day one, which is pretty much impossible for traditional fintech. Usually if you're trying to do some startup like doing banking business or whatever, like Revolut or like some others, you're very restricted to the jurisdiction where you started, and you need to comply with lots of things, and it's like pretty much impossible to scale. While with DeFi, you can just like deploy one smart contract, and it starts working for all people all over the world. And that's like the huge difference, I think.
Okay, so it seems that DeFi is not just buzzwords, as opposed to different things that we had throughout the years, and we're on the right track to actually deliver some meaningful things. But it's still very early stages, very early days of this. I'm wondering, fast forward, I don't know, 10 years from now, we wake up in the morning and we don't have any DeFi technologies or applications live and working. And nothing really dramatically has changed in the financial system. So what did we do wrong, if that is the case?
I don't think it will happen.
Well, I think complete regulatory shutdown is definitely a big risk, right? So what we've done wrong, we didn't involve regulators enough. On the other hand, you need to innovate completely outside of regulation, because that's really when you start with a blank canvas. So I think that's probably a big risk that you basically, see one thing, the DeFi industry needs to get their act together and support an identity solution. I think you're not going to get around KYC. Identity, KYC. This is pretty hard, and FinCENs is pretty aggressive in the US. You go to jail. It's not just like you got a fine for promoting some ICO coin. No, you go to jail. It's anti-terrorism financing laws, etc. I think the good news is that the technology is vastly superior than anything else to create all of this. I think there's a bit of a cultural backlash against creating identity solutions, because they're potentially a privacy nightmare. But I think that's a big risk right now, is that all of these operators or supporters or developers of smart contract code in the US that don't ask for KYC, they have some legal liability right there.
I think crypto is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's not, Elon Musk has a famous saying where he said that electric cars are inevitable, but flying to Mars is something we need to want. And crypto is also, I think it's not inevitable that everything we're saying will happen, but it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And there's a very interesting psychological things we discovered about ourselves as a society. Maybe we knew it all along, but suddenly you can really see it in scale. You can see a global movement from all countries starting to talk in code, starting to like really have a common language. We can do this discussion any country in the world right now, and people will understand plus minus what we're saying. So that I think is a new thing. If it will happen or not, it's a matter of belief.
Yeah, I think like just all the protocols create like the same framework for all the countries, and like I think it's a matter of like if one country accepts that and kind of starts regulating it, it's very easy for other countries to like follow that, because it's exactly the same code, like written in exactly the same programming language. So it's not the same to trying to adopt some like foreign laws, but you just like need to kind of, so it's easier for other countries to adopt the same like regulations regarding DeFi once like one of the countries start leading the way.
So basically what I'm hearing from you is, well, both of you and not you, is that the only risk that you're seeing, or the only challenge that you're seeing is regulatory. There is nothing to do, it's nothing to do with the tech or the applications or anything.
There's
sense.
smart contract risk. There's already solutions like Nexus Mutual, which is like a mutual insurance on top of Ethereum, where you can insure yourself against the risk of a smart contract getting hacked. Very interesting, but it only covers code risk. It doesn't cover the risk that they got the economics wrong. So compounds, there's a large risk that if the interest rate is low enough and you get more interest somewhere else, nobody's going to redeem and I can't get my DAI back out. So those would be like more economics kind of risks. I think that
but
could
not
be
detrimental to DeFi.
Yeah, but I think tech evolves all the time, so do apps. So it's just a matter of time, like as long as like getting better and better.
And I mean, it's, if you think about it, the parity hack was $140 million, and yeah, people were pissed for about a week or so, and then that's it.
People moved on.
People moved on. So I think even if you might
Just made it stronger.
it made it stronger, right? So you might have some black swan event around DeFi. I could see that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like one crisis is going to happen there when like the whole economy collapses like one day, and like the sooner it happens is actually better, while the scale is not that
Yeah,
huge.
I agree. Yeah.
But we'll get over it, and like we'll keep working after that anyway.
Yeah, and people learn a lot more if they lose their money. It's a much better lesson than if you just say you can do this or you can do that. Give them a way to test it. It's it's a much more appropriate approach to the
So we'll
times
need to
we're
go
living.
through
on
that,
on
but-
that note, let's hope everybody loses some money in crypto.
To learn a lesson.
Things that
to grow it
Don't invest
stronger.
more than you can afford to lose. I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. I think we have to finish. I'm happy for you to have final words. If there is anything that you wanted to say and I didn't ask, please feel free. And thank you, everybody that was here and listened to us. And enjoy the rest of Blockchain Week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.